The graduation cap felt heavy in my hands as I watched my parents fuss over Mackenzie's gown, smoothing invisible wrinkles and taking endless photos. My twin sister glowed under their attention while I stood 3 feet away, clutching my own cap like it was made of lead instead of cardboard. "Mom, can you help me with—" I started, but she was already turning away, camera clicking as Mackenzie posed against our childhood home's front door. "You'll figure it out, Bethany," Mom said without looking back. "You always do." Those 4 words. The same ones they'd used when I'd asked about college funding 4 years ago. The same ones when I'd needed help with textbooks, rent, groceries. You always do. As if being self-sufficient was some kind of consolation prize instead of abandonment wrapped in a compliment. My chest tightened as I watched Dad straighten Mackenzie's tassel with the kind of gentle attention I'd stopped expecting years ago. They'd paid her full tuition at State, $60,000 without batting an eye. When I'd gotten into the same program, they'd smiled and said the money was tied up in investments, and I'd find a way like I always did. So I had. Community college first, then transfers, scholarships, 3 part-time jobs, and student loans that would follow me to my grave. While Mackenzie studied abroad in Italy, I'd served coffee at 5 a.m. to afford textbooks. While she joined sororities, I'd tutored struggling freshmen for gas money. But today, we were both graduating with the same degree. Today, I'd prove that their investment, or lack thereof, didn't determine my worth. I just didn't know yet how dramatically I was about to prove that point. The auditorium buzzed with hundreds of families claiming seats, but I could spot my parents instantly. They were the ones with professional cameras and matching proud parent t-shirts with Mackenzie's name emblazoned across the front. Not mine, just hers. "Your family's really going all out," said a voice behind me. I turned to see Professor Martinez, my economics advisor, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one with a knowing smile that made my throat tighten unexpectedly. "They're proud," I managed, accepting the warm cup gratefully. Professor Martinez had been the one constant through my chaotic college years, the one who'd helped me navigate scholarship applications at midnight, who'd written recommendation letters when I'd barely had time to ask properly. "Of both of you, I'm sure," she said, but something in her tone suggested she'd noticed what everyone else seemed to miss. "Bethany, I need to tell you something before the ceremony starts." My stomach dropped. Had I failed something? Was there some last-minute issue with my graduation? "The Henderson Foundation contacted me yesterday," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They've been tracking students who've overcome significant financial hardship while maintaining academic excellence. Your name came up." The coffee cup trembled in my hands. The Henderson Foundation. I'd heard whispers about them. They were legends in academic circles, known for life-changing opportunities that came out of nowhere. "They want to recognize you today," Professor Martinez said, her eyes bright with something that looked like pride. "During the ceremony. There's more, but I can't say anything else until—" "Bethany!" Mom's voice cut through our conversation like a blade. "Stop chatting and find your seat. We don't want to miss Mackenzie's moment." Professor Martinez squeezed my shoulder. "Trust me," she whispered. "Today changes everything." I found my assigned seat in the sea of black caps and gowns, my hands still shaking from Professor Martinez's cryptic words. Around me, other graduates chatted excitedly with their families, but I sat alone, watching my parents position themselves in the 3rd row with their professional camera equipment trained on Mackenzie's section. The ceremony began with the usual pomp, speeches about bright futures and endless possibilities that felt like they were meant for everyone but me. I clapped mechanically as various awards were announced, my mind racing with questions about what Professor Martinez had meant. The Henderson Foundation. I'd Googled them once during a late-night study session, reading about their mysterious benefactors who'd built fortunes in tech and real estate. They were known for finding diamonds in the rough, students who'd succeeded despite impossible odds. But surely not me. I was just someone who'd survived, not thrived. Our next recognition comes from a very special foundation, the dean announced, and my blood turned to ice water. The Henderson Foundation has asked to present their annual Excellence Through Adversity Award to a student who exemplifies resilience in the face of extraordinary challenges. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was sure the person next to me could hear it. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in front of my parents, who'd spent 4 years telling me I was capable of handling everything alone. This year's recipient maintained a 4.0 grade point average while working multiple jobs to fund her education entirely through scholarships and personal earnings. She tutored other students, conducted research, and graduated summa cum laude, all while receiving no family financial support. The words hit the auditorium like bullets, each one finding its target in my parents' carefully constructed narrative. I could feel hundreds of eyes searching the crowd, and somewhere in the third row, I knew my parents were beginning to realize what was happening. Please join me in congratulating Bethany Morrison. The applause erupted like thunder, but all I could hear was the silence from my family's section. My legs moved without permission, carrying me toward the stage while my vision blurred with tears I'd held back for 4 years. The walk to the stage felt like floating through a dream where everything moved in slow motion except my racing heartbeat. Each step up those stairs carried the weight of 4 years. Every early morning shift, every rejected application for help, every night I'd fallen asleep over textbooks because I couldn't afford proper lighting in my cramped apartment. Bethany Morrison, the dean said warmly, shaking my hand as cameras flashed. Your story has moved us all. Behind him stood a woman in an elegant navy suit I didn't recognize, but her smile was genuine as she stepped forward with an envelope that looked far too official for comfort. Miss Morrison, she said, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. I'm Catherine Henderson, founder of the Henderson Foundation. We've been following your academic journey for 2 years now, and frankly, we're astounded by what you've accomplished. 2 years. They'd been watching me for 2 years while I'd felt invisible to everyone who mattered. The Excellence Through Adversity Award comes with a $150,000 scholarship for graduate studies, she continued, and gasps rippled through the crowd like waves. But more importantly, we'd like to offer you a position with Henderson Industries as our new Director of Educational Outreach, starting at $120,000 annually. The world tilted sideways. $150,000. A 6-figure job. In one moment, every financial worry that had consumed my life evaporated like morning mist. Your resilience and academic excellence, while completely self-funded, demonstrates exactly the kind of leadership we need, Catherine Henderson continued. Someone who understands struggle can best help others overcome it. I managed to accept the envelope with trembling hands, my voice catching as I whispered, "Thank you." The applause was deafening now, a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. But through the cheering crowd, I found my parents' faces in the third row. Dad's mouth hung open like he'd forgotten how to close it. Mom's professional camera had dropped to her lap. Forgotten. The matching proud parent shirts suddenly looked like costumes they'd worn to the wrong play. For the first time in my life, they were looking at me. Really looking, and seeing someone they'd never bothered to notice before. Walking back to my seat felt like descending from Mount Olympus into a world that had fundamentally shifted beneath my feet. The envelope in my hands contained more money than my parents had ever spent on my education, and the job offer represented financial security I'd never dared dream of achieving. But it was the whispers that followed me down the aisle that made my chest swell with something I'd never experienced before. Pride that belonged entirely to me. Did you hear? No family support at all. 4 years of working multiple jobs and still graduated summa cum laude. That's real strength right there. I slipped into my seat as the ceremony continued, but I couldn't focus on anything except the burning sensation of eyes on me. Not just my parents' shocked stares, but the newfound respect from classmates who'd barely acknowledged my existence before. The girl beside me, who'd never spoken to me in 4 years, leaned over and whispered, "That was incredible. I had no idea what you'd been through." When Mackenzie's name was called for regular graduation honors, the applause felt polite compared to the thunderous recognition I'd received. She walked across the stage with the same confidence she'd always possessed, but for the first time in our lives, she wasn't the star of the show. After the ceremony ended, I found myself surrounded by strangers wanting to shake my hand, professors I'd never met congratulating me, and classmates suddenly eager to be associated with the girl who'd just landed a 6-figure job. The attention felt surreal after years of invisibility. "Bethany!" My mother's voice cut through the crowd like a knife, and I turned to see my parents pushing through the throng of well-wishers. Dad's face had regained some color, but Mom looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "Sweetheart, we had no idea." Mom started, but I held up my hand. "No idea about what?" I asked, my voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. That I was struggling? That I was working 3 jobs while maintaining perfect grades? That I was doing all of this completely alone? The crowd around us had grown quiet, sensing the tension crackling between us like electricity before a storm. Mackenzie appeared at Mom's shoulder, her graduation cap askew and her usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "We always knew you were capable," Dad said weakly, but the words fell flat in the space between us. "Capable of what, exactly?" I asked, feeling 4 years of silence finally finding its voice. Capable of being ignored? Capable of being forgotten? Capable of succeeding without a single dollar or word of encouragement from my own family? The silence stretched between us like a chasm that had been years in the making. Around us, other families celebrated with hugs and photos. But we stood frozen in our dysfunction, finally exposed under the bright afternoon sun. "Bethany, please," Mom whispered, glancing nervously at the people pretending not to listen. "Can we talk about this privately?" "Privately?" I laughed, and it came out sharper than I'd intended. "Like how we privately discussed my college funding? Oh, wait, we didn't discuss it at all. You just decided I wasn't worth the investment." Mackenzie flinched like I'd slapped her. "Beth, that's not fair. You know, Mom and Dad, I know exactly what they did." I cut her off, turning to face my twin sister fully for the first time in years. "And I know exactly what you did too. You sat there and watched them pay for everything, your tuition, your books, your housing, your spring break trips, and you never once asked why I wasn't getting the same support." Tears started sliding down Mackenzie's cheeks, smearing her carefully applied makeup. I thought you wanted to be independent. You always seemed so strong, so capable of handling everything." "I was 19 years old." The words exploded out of me with 4 years of suppressed rage. I was a teenager who needed her family's support, not their assumptions about my strength. I didn't choose to be independent. You all chose to abandon me. Dad stepped forward, his face flushed. "Now that's not fair, Bethany. We never abandoned you. We were always here if you needed us." "Were you?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found what I was looking for. Here are the 17 unanswered calls I made to you sophomore year when I couldn't afford groceries. Here are the 12 text messages I sent asking for help with textbook costs that you never responded to. Here's the email I sent, begging for gas money so I could drive home for Christmas that went ignored for 3 weeks. The evidence laid bare between us like weapons I'd been storing for battle. My parents' faces crumbled as they realized I'd kept track of every rejection, every silence, every moment they'd chosen Mackenzie over me. We didn't know it was that bad. Mom said weakly. You didn't want to know, I replied, my voice deadly calm now. Because knowing would have meant helping, and helping me would have meant spending money on the daughter who wasn't your favorite. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been smoldering for years. People were definitely staring now, but I found I didn't care. Let them see. Let them witness what 4 years of neglect looked like when it finally found its voice. Professor Martinez appeared at my elbow like a guardian angel, her presence cutting through the toxic tension surrounding my family. Bethany, she said gently, Catherine Henderson would like to speak with you about your start date and relocation package. The interruption gave me a moment to breathe, to step back from the emotional minefield I'd just detonated. My parents looked like they'd been physically struck, and Mackenzie was crying openly now, her perfect graduation day ruined by truths she'd spent 4 years avoiding. I need to go, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. I have a future to discuss. Wait, Dad called out, reaching for my arm. Bethany, please, we can fix this. We can help you now. I turned back to face him, and the look I gave him must have been withering because he actually stepped backward. Fix this? Help me now? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dad, I don't need your help anymore. That's the beautiful irony of all this. You had your chance to be my parents when I was desperate and struggling. Now I'm successful despite you, not because of you. But we're family, Mom said desperately. We love you. Love? The word tasted bitter on my tongue. Love pays for college tuition. Love answers phone calls when your daughter is crying about being unable to afford food. Love doesn't play favorites between twins. What you gave me wasn't love. It was benign neglect wrapped in pretty words about my strength and independence. I could see other families slowing their celebrations to watch our drama unfold, and part of me felt embarrassed by the public spectacle. But a larger part of me felt vindicated. For 4 years, I'd suffered in silence while my family painted themselves as supportive parents. Let them face the truth in the light of day. The difference between us now, I continued, looking directly at my parents, is that I don't need anything from you anymore. Not your money, not your approval, not your belated attempts at affection. I've built a life without you, and it turns out that life is pretty spectacular. Mackenzie sobbed harder, and for the first time, I felt a pang of sympathy for my sister. She'd been their golden child, but she'd also been complicit in my exclusion through her silence. I'm going to take this job in Seattle, I announced, the decision crystallizing as I spoke the words. I'm going to use that scholarship for my master's degree. I'm going to build something meaningful with my life, and I'm going to do it all without expecting anything from any of you ever again. The finality of my words settled over us like a funeral shroud. This wasn't just the end of an argument. It was the end of whatever dysfunctional family we'd pretended to be. Professor Martinez guided me away from the wreckage of my family toward Catherine Henderson, who was waiting with a warm smile and a leather portfolio that probably contained my entire future. But even as we walked, I could hear my mother's voice behind us, cracking with desperation. Bethany, please don't leave like this. We can talk. We can work this out. I didn't turn around. For the first time in my life, I kept walking away from their drama instead of being pulled back into it. Miss Morrison, Catherine said, extending her hand as we approached. I hope you don't mind, but I couldn't help overhearing some of your conversation. Your strength in that moment was exactly why we chose you for this position. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. I'm sorry you had to witness that family dysfunction. Don't apologize, she said firmly. Do you know why the Henderson Foundation exists? My husband and I both came from families who didn't believe in our potential. We know exactly what it feels like to succeed despite the people who should have supported us most. That's why we find students like you, because you understand that success isn't about privilege, it's about persistence. Her words hit me like a warm wave, washing away some of the shame I'd been carrying. Here was someone who understood, who saw my struggle as strength rather than failure. The Seattle position comes with full relocation assistance, obviously, she continued, opening her portfolio. But I want you to know that this isn't just a job. It's a chance to help other students who are facing exactly what you faced. Your story, your resilience, that's what will help them believe they can make it too. Behind us, I could hear my family's voices growing fainter as other graduates and their families moved between us. But I found I didn't care about the distance anymore. For the first time in 4 years, I was walking toward something instead of away from disappointment. "There's something else," Catherine said, lowering her voice. "We've been following your academic work, particularly your research on educational inequality. The board was impressed by your thesis on socioeconomic barriers to higher education. We'd like you to expand that research as part of your role with us." My thesis. The paper I'd written about students exactly like me, using my own experience as a case study. I'd never imagined anyone important would read it, let alone want to build a career around it. "You mean my personal hell actually serves a purpose?" I asked, and Catherine laughed. "Your personal hell, as you put it, gives you credibility that no amount of privileged education could provide. You've lived what you're researching. That's invaluable." As she spoke, I felt something shifting inside me, a fundamental change in how I saw my own story. I wasn't just a victim of my family's neglect. I was a survivor with expertise, experience, and now the platform to help others survive too. 3 months later, I stood in my new corner office in Seattle, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows I'd never dreamed of having. The Henderson Foundation had moved me across the country with an efficiency that still took my breath away. Furnished apartment, company car, expense account, and a salary that meant I'd never again calculate whether I could afford both groceries and gas in the same week. But the real transformation wasn't in my bank account. It was in the stack of applications on my desk from students whose stories read like chapters from my own life. Single mothers working 3 jobs while pursuing nursing degrees. First-generation immigrants whose parents didn't understand the value of higher education. Kids aging out of foster care with no family safety net at all. Each application was a mirror reflecting the girl I'd been just months ago, and each one I approved felt like a small act of revolution against the system that had nearly broken me. My phone buzzed with a text from Mackenzie, the 15th one this month that I hadn't answered. The messages had evolved from angry justifications to tearful apologies to desperate pleas for reconciliation. Mom and Dad had called exactly once, 3 weeks after graduation, to inform me they'd set up a college fund for any future children I might have. As if money could repair the damage their neglect had caused, as if they could buy forgiveness for abandoning me when I needed them most. I'd changed my number 2 weeks later. Professor Martinez had become my lifeline to my old world, sending occasional updates about classmates and always ending with gentle suggestions that perhaps I should consider talking to my family. But every time I thought about reaching out, I remembered the 17 unanswered calls, the ignored text messages, the 4 years of being invisible in my own home. Some wounds cut too deep for simple apologies to heal. "Bethany?" My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 2 o'clock appointment is here. Sarah Chen, the student from Portland State." I straightened my shoulders and closed the file I'd been reviewing. Sarah was 19, working nights at a diner while pursuing pre-med with no family support and loans that would crush her dreams before she could achieve them. Her story could have been mine, but her ending would be different. "Send her in," I said, feeling that familiar surge of purpose that had become my new normal. This was what my suffering had been for, not just to survive, but to ensure other students wouldn't have to endure what I had. Every scholarship I approved, every barrier I helped remove, every dream I helped make possible was proof that my pain had meaning beyond itself. When Sarah walked through my door, Nervous and hopeful and carrying that particular exhaustion of someone fighting the world alone, I saw myself at 19. But this time, I was on the other side of the desk with the power to say yes. "Please, sit down," I told Sarah, gesturing to the comfortable chair across from my desk. She perched on the edge like she might need to run at any moment, clutching a worn folder that probably contained every document she owned. "I know my grades aren't perfect," she began immediately, her voice shaky. "And I know my financial situation is complicated, but I promise if you give me this chance—" "Sarah," I interrupted gently, and she fell silent. "I've read your application 3 times. Your grades are exceptional considering you're working 40 hours a week while taking a full course load. Your essay about wanting to provide healthcare in underserved communities made me cry. You don't need to convince me of your worth." Her eyes filled with tears that she tried desperately to blink away. "So you'll help me? The Henderson Foundation is prepared to offer you a full scholarship covering tuition, books, and living expenses for the remainder of your undergraduate program, plus guaranteed funding for medical school if you maintain your current academic standards." She stared at me in complete silence for 30 seconds before bursting into sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. I handed her the tissue box and waited, remembering exactly how this moment felt. The disbelief, the relief, the sudden lifting of a weight you'd carried so long you'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. "Why?" she whispered through her tears. "Why would you do this for me?" I leaned back in my chair, looking at this young woman who reminded me so much of myself that it was almost painful. "Because someone did it for me when I needed it most, and because your dreams are worth investing in, even if your family doesn't see it yet." As Sarah left with her scholarship paperwork, her entire posture transformed. She walked out of my office with her shoulders back and her head high, carrying hope instead of desperation. That evening, I stood on my apartment balcony watching the Seattle sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Mackenzie and a voicemail I wouldn't listen to. Some bridges, once burned, stay burned. But that was okay. I'd built new bridges, to students like Sarah, to a career that mattered, to a version of myself I'd never imagined possible. The girl who'd sat alone at graduation while her parents fawned over her sister was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is forcing you to save yourself. Because when you do, you discover strength you never knew you possessed, and purpose you never knew you needed. Every scholarship I awarded was revenge served warm, not against my family, but against the system that tried to convince struggling students they weren't worth the investment. Turns out, we were worth everything. Now tell me, what would you do if you were in my place? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and comment where you're watching from.